Hey, how's everybody doing? Um, this is Roy with Roy's Funny Stories. Not always funny, sometimes they are. Uh, this one's a story that's not all that funny. It's just a little. Um, it's a my. I guess it's my Odyssey. Um, but here's how it starts. The This is a little personal, but I'm going to share it with you guys. Um, this is how it starts. E- Everybody, you've heard stories of my dad. Everybody knows about my dad, Jack White. Big tough character, super loud and hardcore, and opinionative, and pretty tough old bird. Anyway, he got emphysema and kidney cancer, and he had really bad diabetes, and he was up in the hospital in where he was living up in Cameron, and he would call me up there, to help him with stuff. He had a farm up there, and I'd help him with the cows, and I'd help him with hay, and I'd help him work on vehicles and such. And he'd call me up there, and as time went by, he got sicker, where he couldn't get around, he couldn't walk very far. His emphysema had gotten so bad that he just he couldn't go very far. Like walking across the yard was like too much for him. So he would call me, and I'd come up there and help him. They broke down in their car one time, and I went out and got him on the highway. He didn't have any oxygen with him. It was like 90 degrees out, and he was having some trouble. So anyway, got him back to the house, and like I said, I used to go up there and help him quite a bit. Well, went up there one time, and he said, "Hey, I'm gonna probably be going in a nursing home." It's quite a shock for me because Jack White was, you know, you, I mean, if you ever met him, you thought he could, you know, bite through a railroad tie. He probably could if he really wanted to. I was used to make the joke that if Jack White decided the Earth should stop spinning, that he could just plant his feet on the ground and just decide to make the Earth stop spinning. That was the kind of confidence and force that the man possessed. He was just an amazing, one of a kind person. Like I said, he he, you've heard that phrase. They broke the mold when he was, came around. My dad broke his own mold. He turned around and broke his own mold because he didn't want anybody to come and even match up to him. He was quite a guy. But anyway, so we ended up getting him. I got him. My sister and I were helping a lot, Dana, and we got him lined up for a nursing home. And he wasn't ready to go in there yet. They had to wait a little bit for some, things to go through. And Dad had this old Chrysler Imperial '67 convertible Imperial that he had bought a couple years before, and he was driving it around. And he and I were always the car guys. We liked cars, and he and I would, I would always work on cars with him. And Dad would buy a car, and then we'd take it down in the garage and work on it and paint it and sell it out in front of the house there on North Oak. Dad did it as a kind of as a hobby, really. And I liked it. I liked cars, still do. Well, anyway, this Chrysler Imperial, Dad just decided that he wanted me to have the car. Now, I didn't want the car. I didn't care about that car. I didn't care about anything that he had. It wasn't. That's just never how I've been. I'm just not about possessing stuff, And I don't look at, I don't look at my dad getting sick as a way to, I might be able to get this or that. It's just not how I'm built. So anyway, my dad says, "Hey, Roy Dan," or Roy. He called me Roy. All my brothers and sisters, mom called me Roy Dan, but that's another story. But his dad's name was Roy. So anyway, he said, "Roy, I want you to have this Imperial." I said, "I don't want it." He goes, "I know you don't want it." I said, "Dad, I don't want anything you have. I just want you to be well." He goes, "I know it, I know it." I said, "I don't want it." He goes, "Well, yeah, nah," he wasn't one to, he didn't take no for an answer. And so I went and, I went back home, and then The next, like a couple weeks later, he needed some more help with something, and I went up there, and I was helping him with a bulldozer. He was rebuilding a bulldozer, believe it or not. He was doing stuff till the very end, but I went up and helped him put some hydraulic lines on the bulldozer and do some stuff to it, some heavy things he couldn't lift around. And again, he says, "I want you to have this car." And I said, "Dad, look, please don't stop talking to me about this car. I don't care about the car." He goes, "I know, that's why I want you to have it, because, I know that that's how you are." And I said, "Well, Dad, no, I don't want it." He goes, "Well, no, no, no." So I go on. So I come back like 2 weeks later. We're getting ready to put him in the nursing home. And I go into the house there, up on his farm. And he calls me in there, and he and Lois are sitting at the table. And he has these papers sitting there. And he says, "Sit down." I go, "Okay." So I sit down there, and he says, "Here, this is the title. This is the paperwork for the car. I want you to have the car. I'm not taking no for an answer. I don't want it to just be sit here and somebody try to sell it or whatever." He says, "I just don't want it. I just want you to take it now." And I said, "Well, Dad, I don't want the darn thing. You know that." And he goes, I know. Just take the car." So he gives me the title and he gives me the paperwork. And Lois says, "Your dad really wants you to have this car, Roy Dan. Don't, Roy, just, let him do this. He really wants to." So I said, "All right." So my intent was just to take the title and never sign it and never come get the car. I appeased him for a moment there. So I go back home 2 weeks later. Dad calls, "You gonna come get this car?" I said, "No, I don't want the car." He said, "Well, you got the title and everything. You're gonna come get the car." I go, "Well, let me take some time here and whatever." So another week goes by. He calls me, says he needs some help with some stuff, and for me to bring the trailer, and don't come up unless I have the trailer to take the car away. He said, "This car's in my way, and I want it out of here." So I said, "Oh, geez." So I took the trailer down there. The car wouldn't run. It had something wrong with the ignition. And anyway, I put the car on a trailer and did the things he needed me to do at the farm. And he was really happy that I was finally taking the car. So I took the car home, pushed it in the garage. And my intent still was just to leave it there, and hopefully he would get better. And then I could give him back the car and, these things would work themselves out. So, as it turns out, as y'all know, my dad passed away. I was in the hospital room there with him, my sister and I, and they pushed a bed up beside his bed, and I laid there in that bed in that hospital up there in Cameron, and he died that night about 4 a.m. It's a pretty traumatic thing because they had made me the power of attorney and other decision making, and when it came to the time when he was to have his to decide whether he wanted to keep living on a machine, my dad had told me that he didn't want to, and I knew he wouldn't. And so with Lois and I, we made a decision that he would go into hospice, and that's how he passed away that night. It was the right thing, but it's hard, for a son to do that with a parent. It's very difficult, and so that caused me to have some issues, of course, and went through the funeral, had a nice military funeral, and everything went well there, and it was they fired off their guns and they did all that stuff, and then I went back home, and I thought, well, I'll get this car running. So I got it running, drove it around a bit. It was fun, and but Dad never really liked that car. He just bought it he was more like a Chevy guy, He bought it as a project because he just liked projects like that bulldozer. And he really didn't like that car all that much. It had a lot of things on it that would go bad and be problems, be a lot of trouble. Had electric seats and cruise control. They called it autopilot, and they had a whole lot of complicated systems on it that could go bad. So anyway, I ended up having the car for like a year, and kept it in the garage most of the time. And I decided to sell it. And I took it up to Meekums and sold the car. And I gave most of the money to my son for his college. My oldest son, Christopher, because that's what my dad would have wanted. He really liked Christopher a lot. So I gave him a lot of the money, and uh, we paid some bills with a little bit, and I had like 5,000 left over. Now I was still having some, I was having some issues, um, stress issues, and trouble with this whole situation, and I really wasn't thinking very clear. In hindsight, I was depressed. It just got worse, and when you get depressed like that, you don't make good decisions. You make bad decisions, and I ended up deciding that I wanted a Chevy, a '67 Chevy Nova, and so I went to I started looking around online, and I found one down in Georgia, and so just out of a ill-advised decision, I decided to take my $5,000 and fly down to Georgia one way and look at this car, and meet someone that I didn't know, and they were going to pick me up at the airport. Now, you've heard of all these Craigslist things where people get, murdered and all. And, I took a very ill advised, dangerous trip. And I'm going to follow this up uh, with the rest of the story. It's going to take several installments to tell this Odyssey. It began with my dad dying, and then it leads into an incredible adventure, frightening situations, dangerous situations, and an incredible finish. And I'm going to tell this story um, over the next week or so, a couple weeks, bit by bit. Um, this is the first installment of my Odyssey, and and how I got to the point where I am now. So I'm going to get back to the funny stories. This is kind of funny in a way too. There's some comedy in this, but it's a it's a very interesting story that goes into a person's psychology and decision making, and what depression can do to a person, and the decision making process, and how you get out of things, and instinctive actions, and it's quite a story. So I'll share it with you all um, in the next installment. You guys have a good day and take care of yourselves. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.